There are so many incredible programming languages to pick from nowadays, from Rust to Go to Elixir to, of course, TypeScript, which is why it's kind of crazy that developers are so bad at picking languages. I feel like every conversation I see about languages is either toxic or wrong or some chaotic combination of the two. Why is it like this? I just saw an article that I'm very excited to go through with you guys. Why engineers can't be rational about programming languages. There are a ton of reasons why, and I'm sure that both the author and I are going to have a lot of thoughts about that. But language conversations don't pay the bills, so we're going to do a quick word from today's sponsor and then dive in. Deploying code is so easy nowadays. Just throw it up on a VPS and you're good to go. Until you need a database that'll store that code, then you need to spin that up and hopefully you put it in the right place. If not, good luck. And then you realize that requests are slow for some users, so you have to spin up Cloudflare to put a CDN in front. And then they start getting DDoS, so now you have to put another layer in front of that. And now everything is piled up, and as soon as you want to do a new deploy, you better hope whoever's doing that deploy knows where everything is and how to make sure it all stays in sync. Or you could just use today's sponsor, Savala. These guys get deployments. All of the things I just described, from attaching the database to Cloudflare, to CDNs and DDoS protection, to pipelines for auto-deploying, everything you need is just part of the Savala experience. These guys get deployments, and they can deploy anything you want to throw at them, even WordPress. Kinsta, the company that owns Savala, has been dealing with crazy WordPress stuff forever, and now they have a dashboard where I can click settings and turn a CDN on or off through Cloudflare in front of my web servers that they are hosting, including the databases. If I want to spin those up, it's as easy as going to the dashboard, clicking databases, clicking create new, and now I just choose whatever I want and I have my new database. Imagine if everything else in the world was that easy. Life would be so much better. I've been super happy using Savala for my one-off projects lately. If you want to spin up a server or even use one of their existing templates, like you want to spin up Firecrawl or Moodle even, oh man, memories. There's no better place to quickly spin up whatever you need to do, link it to your GitHub, and not worry ever again. If you want to save money, time, and stress and just get back to work coding, check them out today at soydev.link/Savala. You'll get $50 of credit when you sign up now. Why engineers can't be rational about programming languages. The leadership blind spot. How identity drives multi-million-dollar technical debt. Oh boy, this is a fun start. A programming language is the single most expensive choice that a company makes, yet we treat it like technical debates. After watching this mistake bankrupt dozens of companies and hurt hundreds more, I've learned the uncomfortable truth. These decisions are rarely about technology. They're about identity, emotion, and ego, and they're destroying your velocity and budget in ways that you can't see until it's far too late. I agree with everything here but the first sentence. A programming language is the single most expensive choice that a company makes? No. There are a lot of other very expensive decisions that companies make. A lot of them. But yes, the language choice does matter, but you also can change it. I was at Twitch when we moved from Ruby on Rails to TypeScript for the front end with React and Go for the back end. It was a rough transition, but it wasn't that rough. It made things significantly better. And it wasn't even that much harder than if we started from Go day one. Like, it was meaningfully different, but the work was going to be hard no matter what. Ended up being worth it for sure. Like, thinking back, I obviously wasn't there when Twitch chose Rails, but it's hard to imagine a world where they could have picked something else that was more correct and Twitch would have been better off as a result. Rails was the wrong choice for a bunch of reasons, but it was a good enough choice to get Twitch to the point where it mattered. And generally speaking, I think companies should be optimizing to getting to a point where their technical decisions matter, not optimizing for making the right technical decision. But we'll see where this one goes, because it seems like this author and I already agree a lot, but not quite on everything. Early in my career, I worked at Tackle, which was a promising social networking site for high school athletes that was popular in the mid-2000s. Okay, not getting any good information on how popular this was. It seems like it was doing okay at the time. Early in his career, he was working there. The sudden departure of someone led to him going from a lead engineer to the VP of engineering, leading a team of 12. While we were delivering on all of our goals, I was in my early 20s and lacked experience, which was a risk that our board wanted to fix. They pressured our CEO to recruit a CTO with more experience. I also watched this happen at Twitch. The original CEO and one of the founders of Twitch was Emmett Shear. He was very technical, but he had to be the CEO of Twitch and also took a lot of product leadership. Other people would rise to be CTO-ish and run tech, but none of them had enough experience to really do that. So he got a lot of pressure to bring in a CTO. So he did, and then fired them a week later. And then did much later on. I don't think they lasted too much longer the second time. I wasn't there for it. But supposedly, this third time, the CTO is actually really good. I looked forward to learning from him. He was a well-known figure in the Perl community, and he arrived with a stack of O'Reilly's camel books. The Perl people. I've had such a mixed experience with Perl people. One of them was one of my first managers that got me the job at Twitch, and I love him to death, but he shouldn't make tech decisions anymore. One of his first acts was to pronounce that our language, PHP, was the wrong choice. He decreed a switch to Perl. I am no fan of PHP. I am not going to sit here and glaze PHP ever for almost any reason. Why the? I know it's 2009 era. I get it. But this is still, this hurts. This hurts so much. No. This sounds about right, though. The decree, the switching to Perl, happened after what felt to the author like a sham analysis comparing PHP and Perl. Our velocity collapsed. Our team had to not only learn a new language, but rebuild from scratch, delaying our product by 9 months. Our monthly burn jumped from 200K to 500K as we more than doubled our size to make up for the lost velocity while building the new Perl-based system, which halved our runway. This seems less like picking the language was the failure, but changing the language to something for no good reason was the failure. Our CTO did deliver, at least on some of his promises. We built a beautiful system, one I was truly proud of, but it was too late. By the time we finally launched, the market opportunity had vanished. Facebook had now expanded beyond colleges, and we were at the end of our monetary runway. The increased spend had shortened our runway by half, and we didn't have enough momentum with the new site to reach the milestones that we required to raise more money. Yep, it is a very real problem. When you want to raise more money, your company needs to have something that makes it a promising investment. Nobody's investing because they're going to make money on you in a year or two. They're investing because you look like you have a good chance of being really successful in 10 years. The thing that makes it look like that is a big up and to the right curve for the amount of users you're getting or how much growth you have or something cool like that. An exponential curve in your expenses because you double the number of engineers because you pick shit tech, that's not going to get you more investments. Having user growth that looks like you could compete with Facebook, that will get you investments. But they wasted too much time and money doing something that doesn't help with their business. And as a result, they couldn't raise more money. This is arguably venture capital working. This business was punished for doing things that made them less likely to succeed because now they can't raise money and they spent a whole bunch. Don't do this. When I realized that the creator market was an absolute shit show for building tooling in, and I realized paying was not the right product, rather than let us try our hardest to burn out in the space and spend all of our money until it failed, I'd made a really hard decision. I extended the runway by laying off the vast majority of the team. It was down to just Mark and me for a while. And we did that because we knew we were building the wrong thing. We needed time to find the right thing. And rather than waste all of our money and be in a position where we couldn't raise, we extended our runway as long as we could. So we'd be in a really good spot when we decided to raise again in the future, which we haven't done yet because we're profitable now with T3 chat, which is still unbelievable. But like, you got to think a lot about runway as part of this. And it almost seems like the CTO hire was a mistake because previously the CEO would keep track of the budgeting and expenses and all of that. And the author, as the VP of Eng, could execute where things were without risking exploding the project. And what's way funnier here is that the board were the ones who wanted this fixed. The reason the board would get involved here is they want to maximize the chance that they make their money back. But there's something very important to know about the boards of most companies. They're not founders, they're not engineers, they're not useful employees, they're the board. They're rich assholes that invested a lot of money early on and got the privilege of telling the CEO he's wrong when he's probably actually right. If your board agrees with everything you do, you're doing a bad job. The best thing you can do to your board is lie. I'm so thankful that we have a board of one person right now for T3. It's me. It makes life so much easier. I am petrified of having to have a board. I can't help but eye things like Standard Capital and just want it. One of the coolest things that they're doing for this, it's a Series A fund by some XYC people. And the point of this is to make it easier to do a Series A without a bunch of bullshit, which includes the board control side. They don't take a board seat. Great founders have heard the horror stories of what can happen with board members. They don't want a boss. The best founders understand the best advice and support will come from peers that they respect. Yep. This is a combination of a shitty board wanting to force the company to be in the shape of things they thought were good in an era where no one knew what they were doing yet. This was like mid-2000s. They convinced this guy to hire a CTO whose job is to overhaul the tech, and sure as hell he did, and he ran the company into the fucking ground in the process. So yeah, this is a language switch that shouldn't have happened, a hire that shouldn't have happened, and a board that had no idea what the fuck they were doing, and a CEO that listened to them because he's a pussy. That's what happened here. There's still things to learn from it, and I'm excited to see where this all goes, but I just want to give my thoughts on that as a founder and investor. That's what happened here. I've often wondered, what if we had just stuck with PHP? We had a fine system and real momentum. We would have launched much earlier at a fraction of the cost. PHP was good enough for Facebook. Why not us? This is a very funny statement too, because PHP was good enough for Facebook until it wasn't. And at that point, Facebook took the crazy pill option, which is rewrite PHP to compile to native code as a language they called hack. It was easier for them to compile PHP to C and make it way faster than it was for them to port off of PHP, which is hilarious. And that's why they called it hack. It's such a hack, but they did it and it worked and they're still using it to this day. Here's a fun one though. The question that haunted the author was, why would such an experienced leader make such a terrible mistake? I have so many thoughts there. This is going to be a fun read. Promises made. Switching to Perl would unlock the architecture that we needed, and rebuilding from scratch would accelerate hiring and quality. But the reality that was delivered was quite different. Velocity collapsed as the team had to relearn and rebuild everything, and their burn rate jumped so high that it ran the company out. The pattern repeats. As my career progressed, I saw the same pattern over and over. As language product lead at Google, my group included C++, Java, Go, and Python. At MongoDB, I managed teams writing in 13 different languages. Please tell me that's an SDK team that's like building connectors or something. No team should be in 13 languages. That terrifies me. In both places, I saw brilliant engineers arguing past each other, armed with conflicting data, all of it true, but none of it complete. At Google Cloud, I saw these same challenges across our own customers. Fast forward 2 decades from Tackle, and I had a deja vu moment. I watched as a VP of engineering presented to leadership why his team needed to build their next system in Rust. The presentation eerily paralleled my experience with Tackle. In the old presentation, nearly every reason the CTO gave for Perl was truer of PHP at the time. Now, every single reason given for choosing Rust in the presentation, Go was objectively better at. As an example, they cited easy building and deploying as a Rust advantage. It's true that is a strength of Rust, but Go's nearly instant cross-compilation and single static binary is even stronger than Rust in that specific criteria with Rust's very long build times. Yep, I hate Go, and I'm okay with Rust, and I agree with every word of this paragraph. We need to evaluate languages that are easier before committing to languages that will slow us down, and Go, as much as I hate it, is a much easier language, and it makes a lot of sense in a lot of places. It's not that I think they should have chosen Go. Go would have been the wrong choice for their situation, and I do believe that Rust was the right choice. But what struck me was how broken the reasoning was. If they were making a logical argument, surely they would have considered Go, and in doing so with their presented criteria, they would have realized Go was a better option and, at the very least, refined their criteria. Yep, it sucks that the argument is, here's all these things that are good about Rust, and not, here are the unique qualities of Rust that other languages don't have that make it right for us. The presenter was showing, look at how good Rust is, and not, here's why I think this makes sense and this doesn't. Because they're thinking too much about Rust and not enough about languages or what's right for the company. That's the harshest reality. The people who push for these things are doing it because they like the language more than they like their job, and they want the language and the job to collide, but they want that to collide because they just want to think about the language all day. It is what it is. I pulled the VP aside after the meeting and asked him, walk me through how you evaluated the other language candidates. His face went blank. We didn't really look at any others, he admitted. Everyone's talking about Rust. There it was. A $50 million decision made on hype, about to be greenlit. That hurts. That really hurts. For me, this was the moment of epiphany. Finally, an answer to the question for the beginning of my career. The presentation didn't share an analysis. They hadn't done one. It was a justification for a choice already made. This was a decision based purely on hype, emotion, and identity. Louder for those in the back. Couldn't be more true. I see this a ton. If the person making the language decision is really excited about it, it's probably the wrong one. If they're begrudgingly excited about it, they're like, yeah, this seems like the right call. We're not sure, but it seems good enough after my evaluation. That's the right choice. The best technical decisions should not make everyone really happy. They should make some people pissed and some people groan. Every technical debate is really 2 conversations. In every language discussion, 2 conversations are happening simultaneously. The visible one, Things like Rust is memory safety without garbage collection. Go has faster compile times and easier deployment. Python has the richest machine learning ecosystem. But the invisible conversation is, I am a Rust programmer. I want to become a Rust programmer. I cannot imagine being someone who doesn't choose Rust. Yep, banger after banger. If you just read this and thought, well, my last language choice was different, I was being rational, your invisible conversation is running right now, defending itself while you read this sentence. Yep, I don't pick TypeScript because it's the right solution. I pick TypeScript because it's a good enough solution, I like it, and it won't get me in trouble. Yeah. If you ever see me writing Go, know that that's not my choice, but I'm doing it because it's the right solution. If you see me writing TypeScript, know that I'm doing that because it's the easy way out and I don't want to think about things. If you see me writing Elixir, know that I'm just pretending I can use it for things because I love it dearly and have no good excuse for it. This is actually part of why I think I'm more rational than the average engineer in these conversations. I know I can't use my favorite language for much. I want to. I still wish I could write everything in Elixir. I do. It just doesn't make sense for most of what I'm doing or the place that I'm at or the teams that I'm hiring or anything else. I could write a justification for Elixir for a lot of stuff that I do, but I don't do that as much as I want to and as much as I love it. The fact that the first language I loved was only something I could use for my first year of my career, and then I had to move off of it, forced me to get over this part of myself really quickly. And I did. And I was very happy with where I've landed now as a result. I did not like TypeScript. I hated JavaScript. But now I'm here, and now I'm okay with it. Some of it's Stockholm Syndrome, some of it's practicality, some of it's that I grew to appreciate the language. But man, I had to get over this early, and now when I look at other people doing it wrong, it says a lot. My CTO at Tackle was having the invisible conversation. Every point in his visible Perl analysis was technically true, but it felt like a sham because it was only there to cover the much deeper invisible conversation. He wasn't evaluating languages. He was protecting an identity he'd spent a decade building. What our company paid $300K per month extra for wasn't better architecture or faster hiring. We paid for the opportunity for him to be a Perl CTO instead of a PHP CTO. That was the real transaction. The rebuild was just the payment plan. Whew, so good. That VP's Rust presentation listed easy build and deploy as an advantage, which is technically true, but goes objectively better in that specific criteria. If they were truly having the visible conversation, they would have caught that. They would have at least considered Go in their analysis. They hadn't, because they weren't having that conversation at all, and they were about to spend $50 million on the invisible one. The neuroscience of why you can't see your own bias. Did not know we were going to be getting into neuroscience and brain plasticity here, but here we are. And one of the most fascinating... Oh, I know what study this is. I'm not going to scroll more. I'm going to cite the learning from this study to see if I'm right, and we'll see in a second if I am. And I'm going to ask you guys chat what you think about this too, because I might have to go find this other study if I'm wrong, but whatever. You have two groups of people with opposite beliefs. You have two sets of information that confirm each of those beliefs. You create four groups. Like let's say there's people who think the sky is blue and people who think the sky is gray. So we have our two groups. Sky is blue, sky is gray. We split this. Sky is blue, this group. They read about blue skies. This group reads about gray skies. And then groups 3 and 4, we swap. What do you think happens? If you ask each of these people before and after reading, how strongly do they feel about this belief? So I am 6 out of 10 sure the sky is blue. You have this person, they say this, and then you give them an article proving skies are blue. What do you think happens to them? And then you give a similar group of people that believe the same thing, that said the same 6 out of 10 before, an article that says the sky is gray. What happens to their belief? We would hope in a rational society that if you were to get information that contradicted your belief, your confidence in that belief would go down. And if you got information confirming your belief, your confidence in that belief would go up. But sadly, humans are not rational. And the biggest increase in people's beliefs came when they read conflicting information. If they started at a 6 out of 10 and read more info about blue skies, they would bump to like a 7. But if they start as a 6 out of 10 and read contradicting information, they'll come out at an 8 or a 9. It's absurd that this is the case, but this is how people work. Humans care more about defending their beliefs than challenging them or even confirming them. If you give someone information that confirms what they think, cool, they smile about it and don't change anything. If you give them information that contradicts their belief, they double down and defend it, and they become stronger in that belief. I think this is what we're about to read here. In one of the most fascinating studies done in the past 20 years, researchers set out to understand why people cling to beliefs even when confronted with overwhelming contradictory evidence. What they discussed fundamentally changed our understanding of human decision-making. The researchers recruited participants and first identified which beliefs were central to each person's identity: their political views, their fundamental views, their beliefs that defined who they are. Then, when participants laid an fMRI scanner, the researchers presented them with carefully constructed challenges to these identity-based beliefs, alongside challenges to beliefs that the participants held but weren't as central to their sense of self. The brain scans revealed something remarkable. These two types of challenges activated completely different neural pathways. When a peripheral belief was challenged, something the person believed but wasn't core to their identity, the brain's reasoning centers activated normally. Participants could consider the evidence, weigh the arguments, and sometimes even change their minds. This seems like a different study than the one I was thinking of, almost like a follow-up to it, but this is a very good learning as well. But when an identity-based belief was challenged, the brain responded as if it was under physical attack. The amygdala, your threat detection system, the same system that fires when you encounter a predator or a physical danger, activates immediately. If you've ever seen people saying nasty things about me online, that I'm a degenerate, clickbaiting soy boy that pays Indian devs to write all their code for him because I suck, that's because I challenged their identity at some point. Something I said ran against their belief that the world would be way better if everyone just wrote Rust or some shit that isn't true. And that statement I made irked them so deeply that they lash out on me as a human for daring to think something they care so much about isn't that important. The vast majority of the hate I get almost everywhere on the internet is this in particular. People who identify with something that isn't a big deal and are just going off as a result of it. Chats bring up all their favorite Theo beefs from here. The Flutter dev's identity getting wrecked. The funniest dude was the UUID defender. That was a great one. The guy who was convinced you could crack any UUID. Ugh, legendary. Absolutely legendary. Ironically, I just challenged some people's identity by talking about this, and now they're angry about it. Absolutely. There are going to be some really pissed off people in my comment section for this video now. Going to be fun. The insular cortex, which processes emotional pain and disgust, lights up with activity in these instances. Most tellingly, the brain's default mode network, the system that maintains your sense of self and personal narrative, went into defense mode, working to protect the existing identity rather than evaluate the new information. Yep. In other words, your brain wasn't weighing evidence, it was defending itself from an existential threat. The researchers' conclusion was stark. To consider an alternate view, you have to imagine an alternate version of yourself. Yep, I think about this belief a lot. I remember where I first heard this, but it's way easier to get somebody to rethink a belief, not by saying, here's the information, but instead saying, imagine that you are the same person. There's a clone of you, that everything else is true, except for this one thing. They believe the opposite of what you believe. How would you convince them out of that belief? And then if they gave you these pieces of information, how would you contradict them? And as you get them to start thinking about this other person in the conversation with them, a clone of them with similar beliefs in every way but this, and you give them the back and forth in their head, they reason about it fundamentally differently and you can actually convince them. I have a similar thing I do for myself, which I hold myself to for all my spicy hard takes. For example, let's use the Flutter thing. I hate talking about Flutter, but it's a good example here. I think Flutter's a scourge. I genuinely believe it actively makes the mobile applications we use every day significantly worse. But I can have my belief changed here. I have a framework I've built for myself on how I change my beliefs on things. When I have a strong belief, I have a thing, an edge, an example that if presented to me, I would change my mind. What one piece of information can I be given that will make me change my mind on this thing that I strongly believe? The information that would convince me on Flutter is a Flutter app I can install on my iPhone and use and have a pleasant experience with using it regularly. That's all it would take. Give me one good Flutter app I can use on my phone right now and not be miserable trying to figure out or dealing with the bullshit. I've yet to find one. I've literally installed over 100 Flutter apps on my phone and every single one was garbage, which is why I will not ever take Flutter people seriously. If they can't present me a good app that uses Flutter, an app that's actually pleasant to use that I can see myself using regularly, I don't give a fuck. I just don't care about them or their technology. It is what it is. So for all of my extreme beliefs, I have some piece of information I could be given that would convince me otherwise if it existed. Expo for the win. I have some bad news, Code King. Expo now supports Flutter. Flutter Hearts Expo from the Flutter account. The problem is that, Theo, that this is not core to your identity. I don't think anything that I'm talking about in tech is. There are things. There are definitely things. I honestly think the Flutter thing's on the line for me. Like, I deeply dislike Flutter. That is a thing that it would be hard. Like, if someone showed me a good Flutter app, they would send me into a bit of an existential dread crisis. I did find one that was okay, that I thought was someone's side project, like a 1 or 2 person team, and it was okay. It was, what was it called? I think it was Wondrous. It was an example of an app for a museum, and it was okay. It had some really cool animations and things that you couldn't easily do in other solutions. Like, that's pretty cool. Turns out it was using the new Flutter rendering engine that never shipped. It was built primarily by half the core Flutter team as a demo of that new rendering engine and contracted out to one of the best design firms in the world. They had 50 people working on this tiny app showing 6 exhibits from a random museum. And it was okay. It wasn't good. It was fine. And even then, I was like, fuck, do I have to rethink my Flutter take? And then it never shipped. Then none of the things that made it work shipped. And then half the Flutter team got laid off. So no, I don't have to rethink it. But I felt deeply in myself oh fuck, do I have to rethink this? So ideally, this wouldn't be part of my identity. It's kind of silly that it is. It's stupid. But I do care a lot about these things. They are deep for me. But I'm also autistic enough that I can recognize when I'm wrong and move away from the thing. Your brain can't objectively evaluate challenges to its identity-based beliefs because doing so requires temporarily dismantling the neural architecture that defines who you are. Yep. It's not a matter of being more rational or trying harder. The mechanism that would allow you to see the bias clearly is the same mechanism that the bias has compromised. Yep. It's like the glasses that you can put on to see this are blacked out by this. So it doesn't work. That makes a ton of sense. Think about what this means in practice. Every time an engineer evaluates a language that isn't theirs, their brain is literally working against them. They're not just analyzing technical trade-offs, they're contemplating a version of themselves that doesn't yet exist. That feels threatening to the version that does. The Python developer reads case studies about Go's performance, and their amygdala quietly marks each one of these as a threat to be neutralized. The Rust advocate only looks at identical problems, and their default mode network constructs narratives about why only Rust can solve them. We're not lying. We genuinely believe that our reasoning is sound. That's what makes identity-based thinking so expensive and so invisible. Yep. I wish I had more to add here. This is just all true. It's also showing me a bit like, yeah, I have my biases towards like Flutter and React and whatnot, but I do, more than the average dev, consider alternative options. I wanted to love Gleam. I really wanted to love Gleam. Gleam's a beautiful language. It's built on top of Beam. It also works in the JS VM and in the JavaScript world, compile to JS. Super cool. It had a handful of little things that were missing from Elixir that made it much harder for me to go all in on. It was a beautiful language. I love it. But it was on the line for me, just missing a handful of things I really love. And I ended up not going particularly deep on it as a result. I find most engineers are really bad at doing these types of analyses, of deeply exploring something that is different from what they know. But if you can get good at that, you will level up so much faster. I was a Python guy when I joined Twitch, and I went from a weird Python OOP guy doing a bunch of Flask stuff to Elixir. It was a hard transition, and I ended up falling in love with it, and it became one of those core identity things. So yeah, try your best to not think about yourself and your own biases when learning these things, and if you have to, imagine a different version of yourself or someone else entirely learning it. How would this be useful to somebody who doesn't like any specific language, that knows engineering well, but doesn't know any particular language well? How would they approach this? What would they see? What would they like? What would they dislike? And then try to become that person. We built our industry around the wrong conversation. We call ourselves Pythonistas, Gophers, Rustaceans, and we wear these labels like badges. Sometimes we even wear literal badges like t-shirts and stickers. There's a reason so many of our surnames come from people's crafts. Potter, Smith, Brewer, Brown apparently. What we do becomes who we are. What looks like a decorative label is actually a decision-making framework that operates beneath conscious thought. We've built our entire industry around the visible conversation. We train engineers to debate technical merits. I literally just did a Q&A, for the first time on stream to make some shorts. Half the questions were about language choice. I'm in college, I know JS, they don't teach JS in college. Should I learn Python or C++ or Java? None of it matters. Stop caring. Just go write code, go learn things, go make friends, go do shit. No one cares. One of my best friends, who's in my chat right now, Aiden, writes the most opposite code that I would ever, I would never work in the things that he works in. I don't like writing Go. I don't like building the systems the way he does. The next day I have to deal with Kubernetes, I'm retiring. It's just not where I want to be. But surrounding yourself with people who disagree with you, who do different things from you, and can have good conversations with you is the best thing you can do for your career. You'll never learn everything, so surround yourself with people who have learned other things that will challenge your beliefs so that you can build frameworks for understanding shit and know when your knowledge doesn't make sense in a specific arena. Thankfully, I don't have this problem because you can use TypeScript to do literally everything. You can replace Kubernetes and Terraform with TypeScript using Pulumi. You can write backends in TypeScript with Deno, Node, or even Bun. You can write frontends in TypeScript. Well, you have to write frontends in TypeScript. You can write mobile apps in it. So why would you ever use anything other than TypeScript? Clearly, I'm the one who's right and everyone else is wrong. Anyways, the invisible conversation is much stronger than the visible one. It's why my CTO chose Perl. It's why that VP chose Rust. And it's operating in your next language decision right now. Invisible and unexamined. The moment you hire a Rust developer to evaluate languages, you've already chosen Rust. You just added a $2 million feasibility study to make predetermined decisions feel rational. What a banger. What a banger. That's real. I don't know who you would hire for this because there just aren't many people who truly don't give a fuck about languages. Fuck, am I about to become an Uncle Bob simp? No, I'm not. We're going to keep scrolling. The real cost. The question isn't whether the bias exists. The science is conclusive. The real question is, can you afford to let it make your decisions? The invisible conversation has a price tag. Industry research suggests that technology stack decisions account for 40 to 60% of total dev costs over a product's lifecycle. Research by Stripe found that developers spend 42% of their time on tech debt. When you let identity drive the decision that you're mortgaging your velocity, your budget, and your runway to pay for someone else's sense of self. Yep. The visible conversation is about technology. The invisible conversation is about identity. And the invisible conversation will always win. So how about we make a new framework for this? Language as an economic decision. How do we win when the invisible conversation is constantly working against us? We have to change the conversation entirely. Instead of asking which language is the best, we need to ask, what will this language cost us? Not in salaries, but in velocity, in tech debt, in hiring difficulty, in operational complexity, in every dimension that actually determines whether you survive. Reframe it from a technical debate to an economic one. And unlike identity, economics can be measured, compared, and decided without anyone's ego being threatened. Choosing a programming language is the single most expensive economic decision your company will ever make. Wait till you hear about LLM costs, man. Actually, though, this is the only piece I don't agree with in this whole thing. Almost everything else I'm in line with. The language choice will define your culture, constrain your budget, determine your hiring pipeline, set your operational costs, and ultimately dictate whether you can move fast enough to win your market. We need a framework that makes the invisible cost visible, one that lets us have the economic conversation instead of the identity conversation, one that works whether you're choosing your first language or you're evaluating a migration. Our industry's never really had that framework, until now. Ooh boy. The author's next post is going to be The 9 Factors of a Language's True Cost, a comprehensive framework for evaluating language decisions based on economics and not identity. You'll learn how to quantify the hidden costs, predict the long-term impact, and make defensible decisions that your team can align behind regardless of their language preferences. This was a really good article. Thank you to SBF 13 in particular for Steve Francia for writing this. This was a fantastic read. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier in this video is that Steve was one of the original contributors to Go at Google. He helped build the language, and he still thinks all of this is nonsense. Give him a follow on Twitter. Keep an eye on his blog. Good person to keep in your circle, trust me. I'll leave the link for this post in the description as always if you want to go read it, read his other stuff, and maybe by the time you see this, his follow-up article for that language framework will finally be available for us to use. And if you're trying to make these decisions right now and you don't have this framework yet ready to go, my recommendation might seem a little silly, but I've done this before and it works. If you have two people that want different languages or different tech, instead of letting them explain why their solution is right, make them explain why the other solution is right. Force each to do a presentation on why the other solution is the correct one. And if they struggle to do that, or they intentionally footgun and try to make the thing that they don't like look worse, you have an incredible reason to fire that person. But if they do a good job at this, the problem will resolve itself. Let the people pitch the thing they don't agree with so they learn about the thing much better. and then let the conversation happen after that, the result will be way better as a result because you force them to step out of their own identity and do the thing where they imagine a different person. And in the end, none of this shit matters. Just pick what you're happy with, ship, and get back to work. If it turns out your language is too slow for what you're doing, use the right one to speed up the thing and then get back to fucking work again. The tech you're already using is probably good enough. Stop worrying so much about this shit unless you really, really have to. Or just ask for an LLM to decide for you, I guess. I don't even know anymore. Let me know what you guys think. Am I overblowing this, or are language conversations actually this dumb? Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, please pick TypeScript.